Hello, and thank you for watching this presentation, which aims to comprehensively examine the world of PA education policy and advocacy. My name is Tyler Smith, and I'm the Senior Director of Government Relations for the PA Education Association. And I'm pleased to be joined today by PAEA's Government Relations Manager, Catherine Majewski. Over the course of the next hour, we're looking forward to providing you with an introduction to PAEA, our policy agenda, and opportunities facilitated by the association for you to get involved, as well as opportunities for you to engage in self-directed advocacy. At PAEA, we strongly believe that students and faculty have a unique capacity to advance positive change for the profession and ultimately to achieve meaningful policy goals. Our hope today is that you will feel empowered to begin your own advocacy journey, whatever that might look like for you. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Let's begin today's discussion with a very basic question. Who is PAEA? PAEA is one of 4 national organizations that represents an aspect of the PA profession. Specifically, PAEA represents all accredited PA education programs in the US and provides advocacy, professional development, assessment, and admissions resources to PA faculty and programs. AAPA, on the other hand, represents the broader profession and is tasked with ensuring a robust practice environment for both current and future practicing clinicians. NCCPA administers the PANCE and PANRE exams, and the ARCPA is responsible for accrediting both entry-level PA programs and postgraduate residency and fellowship programs for PA graduates. Within the broader PAEA umbrella, the government relations team is responsible for federal policy impacting PA education. Throughout all of our work, we seek to influence federal policy in a way that equips PA programs, faculty, and students to best serve the needs of patients. Policy enacted by Congress and implemented by the executive branch plays a key role in ensuring that PA graduates can provide high-quality care once they leave their programs, and our team attempts to influence policy through multiple levers. The core functions of PAEA's government relations work can really be divided into 4 key domains. These are direct lobbying, grassroots advocacy, appointments to federal advisory committees, as well as capacity building. The first of these domains, direct lobbying, is probably what you're most familiar with when you think about the idea of government relations. Catherine and I serve as the association's in-house federally registered lobbyists and regularly meet with legislative and executive branch staff in order to advocate on behalf of our policy agenda. In addition to direct lobbying, we also work to leverage the power of grassroots advocacy. Congressional offices are particularly responsive to the needs of constituents, and so we facilitate several opportunities throughout the year, like our spring advocacy trip and student health policy fellowship, to directly place students and faculty in front of their elected representatives. The third component of our work is federal appointments. As agencies work to carry out the programs and mandates established by Congress, they're often guided by advisory committees, which are composed of outside stakeholders and experts. We work to ensure that the PA voice is represented on these key committees by advancing nominations for qualified faculty as opportunities come up throughout the year. The final component of our work is capacity building. In addition to directly facilitating opportunities for students and faculty to connect with congressional offices, we also conduct trainings like this over the course of the year so that students and faculty can engage in self-directed advocacy on behalf of the profession throughout the course of their careers. As part of PAEA's advocacy efforts, we engage with a wide array of health and education stakeholders within both the legislative and executive branches of government. In the House of Representatives, the Energy and Commerce Committee has jurisdiction over health programs, whereas the Education and Labor Committee holds jurisdiction over higher education policy. In the Senate, responsibility for both health and education policy is consolidated in the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. I'd also note that both the House and Senate have appropriations committees, which determine funding levels for programs on an annual basis, which we also engage with. Within the executive branch, we also work with a number of other key stakeholders. For example, the White House is responsible for setting overall administration policy, while the Office of Management and Budget determines appropriations priorities for congressional consideration. The Health Resources and Services Administration administers most health workforce development programs, and the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration also plays a key role in mental health workforce initiatives specifically. So now that you have an idea of how PAEA accomplishes its work and some of the key players involved, I wanted to shift to giving you an idea of what we're actually trying to achieve through these advocacy tools. As you may know, PAEA represents the nearly 300 accredited PA programs across the country. As a healthcare education association, our policy portfolio is divided pretty evenly between health policy on the one hand and higher education policy on the other, with particular emphasis on issues such as federal health workforce investments, clinical site availability, student loan access, and faculty development initiatives. Each of these issues play a key role in determining the ability of our programs to prepare well-trained graduates, which is why they are consistently prioritized by the association for our advocacy efforts.
With that said, I wanted to dedicate some time to talking in depth about our work within each of these policy domains. So let's start off with talking about our healthcare portfolio. One of the most critical components of PAEA's healthcare agenda is advocating for increased investments in the programs that Congress has already created to improve the supply, distribution, and diversity of the nation's health workforce. Collectively, most of these programs are referred to as Title VII, which just means the seventh section of a law known as the Public Health Service Act. Title VII encompasses a broad range of programs, some of which are accessible by PA programs and some of which are not. The following three programs are some of the most substantial investments that are currently available to PA education. The most significant of these programs for our purposes is primary care training and enhancement grants. Based upon the extensive evidence of the critical importance of primary care in a well-functioning health system, PCTE grants enable programs to develop curriculum, facilitate clinical rotations, and conduct other activities with the goal of increasing the number of graduates going on to practice in primary care capacities. Of the $49 million provided to this program each year, PA education is entitled to receive a floor of 15% by law. In addition to PCTE grants, another priority for PAEA is known as Area Health Education Centers. AHECs assist PA programs in facilitating clinical rotations for their students, particularly in rural and underserved areas, and are currently funded at a level of $45 million each year. The final example that I'll give is scholarships for disadvantaged students. Based upon Congress's demonstrated interest in a diverse health workforce, SDS awards allow programs to provide scholarship awards directly to students and are currently funded at a level of $53 million each year. As I mentioned previously, all of these programs have been authorized and funded for decades, and as such, PAEA's goal from an advocacy perspective is to increase funding each year to allow the reach of these programs to be significantly expanded. In addition to advocating for higher funding levels for existing programs, we also work to combat emerging issues for PA programs across the country. One particularly critical challenge is the availability of high-quality clinical preceptors and sites for students. Over the past decade, we have seen a significant increase in the number of PA programs being forced to pay for clinical sites as a result of competition or site demands. Recently, the percentage of programs paying was 35%, and we have just crossed the threshold of 50%. This is a significant concern as the cost of clinical site payments ultimately drives increases in tuitions for students and limits the ability of programs to expand. So what have we done about this? We work to eliminate all possible barriers to preceptors being willing to take students. For example, we recently worked with an interprofessional coalition to change CMS policy on the use of student medical record documentation to allow preceptors to verify rather than redocument student notes. We also have advocated for new reimbursement-based incentives for preceptors to take students, as well as advocated for programs discussed earlier that allow PA programs to support clinical rotations using federal funds. A new area of focus for the PAEA government relations team is enhancing the voice of PA education on emerging public health issues. As opioid overdose-related deaths have risen substantially over the past 20 years, we have worked to make PA education part of the solution. For example, in 2018, when the Support for Patients and Communities Act was being worked on, we were successful in advocating for PA eligibility for a new substance use disorder workforce loan repayment program. After being authorized, the program secured funding for the first time in 2020 and is now making awards to selected SUD treatment providers. In addition to advocating for loan repayment incentives, we are also active in policy efforts to institute parity and waiver training requirements for physicians, nurse practitioners, and PAs to prescribe buprenorphine for opioid use disorder. In addition to the response to the opioid epidemic, we have also been active in efforts to combat maternal mortality disparities. As you may be aware, Black women are nearly 3 times more likely to die compared to white women as a result of pregnancy-related complications. To address this, we partnered with the Black Maternal Health Momnibus Caucus beginning in 2020 to pass a bill known as the Momnibus. If enacted, this bill would provide new resources to promote diversity in the perinatal workforce. Other bills we have supported would provide resources to support OBGYN rotations for PA students in rural areas as a means of expanding access to care.
Now that we've covered our healthcare portfolio, let's transition to talking a bit about the work that we're doing in the higher education space. One of PAEA's most longstanding priorities in higher education is equitable access to federal student loans and loan repayment programs. In this space, we have a number of goals, and I'll describe just a few of them for our purposes here today. First, since 2012, graduate students have not been able to borrow subsidized Stafford loans, meaning that interest starts accruing from the moment students take out their loans. This significantly increases the amount that PA students repay over time, and so we are currently seeking to reestablish access for both PA students and other graduate health profession students to this borrowing option. Beyond the issue of subsidized Stafford loans, existing sources of support for PA students have also fallen under attack in recent years as part of broad efforts to reauthorize the Higher Education Act. For example, many students utilize Grad Plus loans in order to avoid having to borrow in the often more expensive private market. So we're fighting to protect this program as an option for students to take advantage of. Finally, another key priority for us is the National Health Service Corps, which you'll hear a little bit more about later in the presentation. This program provides both scholarship and loan repayment support to PAs in exchange for a service commitment in an underserved area. We are fighting to increase funding for this program, and you'll hear about a recent success that we've had in this space a little bit later in the session. Another critical priority for us in the higher education space is student diversity. Throughout the history of the profession, Black, Hispanic, and Latino and other minority students have been significantly underrepresented in PA education and the broader workforce. Research has repeatedly shown that a more diverse workforce leads to more culturally competent care and ultimately better outcomes for patients, which is why this is such a high priority for the association. To address this issue, we are working to promote the development of new PA programs at minority-serving institutions like HBCUs and HSIs in the hopes of creating a sustained pipeline to the profession of underrepresented minority students. As we mentioned earlier, we're also working to increase funding for existing programs under Title VII to promote diversity, such as scholarships for disadvantaged students. I would also mention that the Health Resources and Services Administration administers a program known as the Health Careers Opportunity Program that promotes matriculation at the K through 16 level, which we also support. An additional priority for us in higher education is the issue of faculty development. As the number of PA programs has risen significantly from 150 in 2008 to nearly 300 today, programs have come under increasing pressure to recruit well-qualified faculty. Through PAEA's research surveys, programs have consistently reported a lack of qualified candidates as their biggest barrier in terms of recruitment. While PAEA administers programs in-house, such as our Future Educator Fellowship, to address this challenge, we're also committed to addressing this on a policy basis. Specifically, we're looking to establish new incentives for clinicians to become faculty, while also advocating for funding for existing programs such as the Faculty Loan Repayment Program under Title VII.
Now that we have outlined our policy priorities, let's turn to the various tools we have in our advocacy toolkit and their pros and cons. As mentioned before, direct lobbying consists of meetings and calls conducted by PAEA GR staff and outside consultants with congressional and agency staff. The pros of direct lobbying are that association lobbyists typically have extensive subject matter expertise when it comes to policy, as well as refined relationship building skills, because it is their job and what they're trained to do. Also, because it is their primary responsibility to advocate on behalf of certain policies, lobbyists have more time to work on their approach with agencies and congressional staff. However, lobbyists have the disadvantage of officials not being accountable to them in the same way that they are to their constituents, and they are viewed as primarily interest-driven. They also do not have the same on-the-ground knowledge that a PA student or a faculty member would have in terms of how a policy would impact their day-to-day education or PA program operations. Grassroots advocacy is the practice of engaging students and faculty in activities that raise awareness of and generate support for PAEA's legislative aims. By empowering students and faculty to share personal experiences with their representatives that support a policy initiative, members of Congress are far more likely to take action. This is because they have a duty to act in the best interests of their constituents, particularly if a significant portion of their constituency is demanding such action. In addition, students can convey personal stories that paint a clearer picture of the problem at hand and deepen the members' understanding of the policy issue in a way that lobbyists can't without having that on-the-ground expertise. However, it is true that PA students and faculty have limited time to devote to advocacy with their demanding schedules and may not have the same background in relationship building or health policy that a lobbyist would. This limited time also impacts a grassroots advocate's ability to maintain long-term relationships with agencies and congressional offices. All that being said, PAEA still relies heavily on grassroots advocacy to achieve our legislative and regulatory goals. Coalition advocacy is the practice of organizational stakeholders joining forces to advance a shared policy interest. For example, a group of health professions education organizations could work together to increase funding for Title VII programs that benefit a wide array of health professions. The power of this approach is that stakeholder collaboration increases the visibility of the issue by combining multiple bases of supporters. Also, the workload is not centered on just one organization and can be distributed among stakeholders. I would also note that it can be particularly compelling to see opposing interests agree on a particular policy issue. For example, doctors and APRNs often battle over scope of practice issues. But when they come together on the same side of an issue, it can be a powerful combination that boosts the credibility of the agreed upon policy. However, some drawbacks to this approach include having too many cooks in the kitchen, which can make it difficult to organize and agree on a strategy or advocacy campaign, and having to compromise on a policy that benefits all stakeholders, possibly at the expense of your ideal policy outcome. For example, in a coalition, instead of focusing on funding for your association's priority Title VII programs, the focus would shift to broad Title VII investment instead. Statements and written communications, like letters to members of Congress or writing an article for a large audience, can be an effective approach to messaging on the importance of any policy. Unlike verbal advocacy, written advocacy can be referenced and cited well after it is written, can be available to a much larger audience, and provides an opportunity for other organizations to join a sign-on letter in support of a policy. It also allows the writer to present a fully formed argument rather than having to stick to high-level talking points. However, the cons to written advocacy are that it's easier to ignore a letter or an article than a person in front of you in a meeting. In addition, the drafting process is typically lengthy and more time-consuming than simply preparing for an in-person meeting, and the impact can be more limited due to the inability to form personal relationships with members of Congress or agency staff through letters and articles.
Now that you have an idea of what tools are available to us as advocates for the PA profession, we wanted to dedicate some time to talking about a few case studies and the approaches that we took as an organization through actual policy examples. The first example that I wanted to start out with speaks to an administrative barrier that previously prevented PA students from taking full advantage of the National Service Corps. As I mentioned earlier, the NHSC is made up of a series of component programs which provide either scholarship or loan repayment support in exchange for a commitment to practice in an underserved community for several years. While PAs and PA students have long been eligible for the largest NHSC component programs, they have not historically been eligible for the Students to Service component, which provides up to $120,000 in loan repayment aid for participants. Eligibility for this program is not set by Congress like the other components, but is instead determined at the agency level, which has traditionally limited participation to medical and dental students. To address this disparity, PAEA leveraged all aspects of the advocacy toolkit to ensure the inclusion of PA students in the program. Specifically, we directly lobbied both the agency and the White House to explain the issue, as well as the importance of PAs in rural and underserved communities. We connected our program directors with congressional champions in key states as part of our grassroots strategy to get them to put pressure on the agency. With regards to coalition advocacy, we partnered with AAPA and other organizations involved in both the PA profession and in rural health access work as part of our outreach efforts. And finally, with written communications, we made our concerns public by writing joint letters to the agency to reiterate the points that we made to them in person. As a result of this multi-year advocacy work, HRSA announced the expansion of Students to Service to PA students for the first time in the fall of 2021, opening a new avenue for PAs to both get relief for their educational debt while simultaneously expanding access to care in underserved communities.
I also thought I would provide an example of a recent legislative advocacy victory pertaining to the National Health Service Corps. As background, the NHSC provides both scholarship and loan repayment assistance to students and clinicians in exchange for an agreement to practice in an underserved area. For more than 50 years, this has been one of the federal government's most successful programs to combat workforce shortages with a long-term retention rate of over 80%. While the NHSC has been tremendously successful, it has also been chronically underfunded. At the previous typical funding level, only 40% of qualified loan repayment applicants could be funded. The rate was even worse for scholarship applicants at 10%. So what did we do about this? Again, we leveraged every aspect of our advocacy toolkit. We engaged in direct meetings with the office of Senator Dick Durbin on a bill that they were working on to expand the NHSC to ensure the inclusion of PAs and PA students. Once we had a partnership with Senator Durbin, we set up direct calls between program directors in targeted states and Republican senators to ensure the bill had bipartisan support. Finally, we engaged with other stakeholders like the Association of Clinicians for the Underserved and others to jointly advocate for the inclusion of Senator Durbin's bill in any response package to COVID-19. The outcome of all this work was the inclusion of $800 million in additional funding in the American Rescue Plan Act signed into law this year. This new funding will result in thousands of new clinicians providing care in underserved areas for years into the future.
Now that you have a good sense of PAEA's advocacy toolkit and examples of where it's been employed on the ground, we wanted to shift to speaking a bit about ways that you can get involved to help advance our efforts based upon both your level of interest and the limited time you have available as a busy PA student. One opportunity for participation that we encourage all students and faculty to take advantage of is PAEA's Grassroots Action Network. The Grassroots Action Network was created in 2017 as part of an effort to help streamline the process for all PA education stakeholders to participate in grassroots advocacy. Through the Grassroots Action Network, you can stay apprised of ongoing policy efforts through monthly updates published by the Government Relations team. Using this information, you can then easily contact your elected representatives on issues important to you using standard messaging provided by PAEA. Finally, the Grassroots Action Network allows you the opportunity to request technical assistance in facilitating program visits with your elected representatives and/or members of their staff. Because we highly encourage students and faculty to consider facilitating a program visit with their elected representatives, I wanted to discuss this opportunity in a bit more detail. For your background, during congressional recess periods, members of Congress often visit institutions in their local community to learn about issues of importance to their constituents. These periods are an excellent opportunity to better acquaint lawmakers with the needs of PA programs, faculty, and students, and arranging a program tour is among the most impactful activities you can do as a grassroots advocate. Beyond acquainting your representative with your program, these visits also allow you to directly make the case for key policy priorities to your representative. If you're interested in pursuing a program visit opportunity, PAEA staff is available to provide you with technical assistance from the original request to the visit day and subsequent follow-up. Simply submit a request via the Grassroots Action Network, and a member of our team will be in touch to help you make your visit a success. The final opportunity I wanted to share, which is facilitated by PAEA, is focused on students with a strong passion for advocacy looking for an opportunity that involves a more significant time commitment. In 2014, PAEA began its annual Student Health Policy Fellowship program to cultivate advocacy and leadership skills in a small group of students selected via a competitive process. The program consists of multiple components, including a live 3-day workshop each September, where selected students participate in lectures conducted by PA policy experts, staffers in the executive and legislative branches of government, and other policy leaders. The workshop culminates in meetings with each of the students' congressional representatives' offices, followed by the implementation of a community-based advocacy project over the year following the completion of the workshop. For those interested in applying for the Student Health Policy Fellowship, the application period is open each year from May through July, with selected fellows notified of their decision in August.
In addition to opportunities formally offered by PAEA, the association also encourages advocates to pursue self-directed advocacy opportunities to inspire policy changes at the federal and state level that ultimately impacts local communities. One such independent opportunity is organizing your own virtual Hill Day, which is a great way to unite your existing social media networks around one message at one time to elevate public awareness of a policy priority and request support for a policy from a large number of elected officials. Typically, because members of Congress prefer Twitter overwhelmingly in comparison to other social media platforms, virtual Hill Days are conducted through Twitter and involve selecting a topic, which is the issue or legislation you're interested in promoting, picking a date, and mobilizing your family, friends, and peers to tweet out their support of PAs and/or PA education while tagging their representatives in Congress and using uniform language and hashtags. While the concept of a virtual Hill Day is simple enough, there are a few best practices that PAEA recommends to all advocates to ensure that their Hill Day stands out from the rest. One of these recommendations is clearly defining the outcome you would like to achieve through your advocacy efforts. Is there a specific bill in the legislature that addresses your issue? If so, will you be requesting additional co-sponsors? Maybe a companion bill in the other chamber or a supporting vote when the bill reaches the floor? These are all questions you must be able to answer and details that will need to be explained to your virtual Hill Day participants. For assistance with developing a clear Hill Day objective, organizers can always reach out to their state chapter, PAEA, or AAPA. Another key ingredient to a successful virtual Hill Day is being strategic about the date you choose. When selecting the date, think about a time period that your issue may be more top of mind for representatives, such as Black History Month or National Women's Health Week, for example, or maybe before an important vote or committee meeting. This will increase the visibility of your message. Advocates should also make it as easy as possible for people to promote and participate in their event. This means providing detailed instructions and ready-to-use content for supporters through an event page, posts, or a flyer. Content shared prior to the event could be a social media graphic that contains the title, date, and hashtag of the event for participants to post in their newsfeed. And content shared during the event would be language for the ask participants will be making to their representatives, along with Hill Day hashtags and hashtags for a related awareness day, week, or month if applicable. Further, As part of the event description, organizers will also want to specify the intended structure for the day, like what time participants should send their tweets. They will also want to provide participants with links to find Twitter profiles of their members of Congress so they can tag them in Hill Day tweets, and remind participants to adjust their privacy settings so their tweets are visible to the public. Finally, to maximize the overall number of participants, organizers should use Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, and other social media platforms to promote the event. This can be done by posting a live or pre-recorded video that explains the significance of the event to your followers and ask them to get involved by visiting a link to the event, posting a message, photo, or video promoting your advocacy event and asking your followers to get others involved by sharing the post, or promoting your virtual Hill Day as a Facebook event and sending invitations to friends and followers with a direct stake in the issue. Another activity advocates can participate in on their own is writing an op-ed. So if there's an issue that you feel passionate about and merits greater attention from stakeholders as well as the public, consider writing an op-ed and submitting it to a newspaper or magazine outlet. Both lawmakers and members of their staff regularly monitor local publications to stay informed about emerging policy issues of importance to constituents, and this is an excellent way to get your priorities on their radar. Before you start writing, there are a few tips to keep in mind to maximize the impact of your publication, such as coordinating with your state chapter and national associations like AAPA and PAEA to discuss your interest in preparing an article. Both state and federal organizations continuously conduct campaigns seeking to influence policymakers and can provide assistance to you in developing your message and submitting your op-ed to targeted publications. You will also want to make sure that you leverage both data and stories to capture the attention of policymakers and establish credibility. If you are personally affected by the policy issue that you plan to discuss in your op-ed, share your story in the introduction and body of your article. Once you have illustrated the personal impact of the issue, use research to provide greater context and to justify the effectiveness of possible policy interventions. It is also very helpful to connect your topic in the op-ed to other issues going on within your community or target audience to increase the likelihood that elected officials will take notice of the publication. For example, if your community has a high prevalence of diabetes, substance use disorders, or other chronic conditions, your op-ed could discuss how a plurality of PAs practice in primary care, the role of PAs in managing chronic conditions, and the importance of investments in programs such as primary care training and enhancement grants for PA students. And finally, while most of your op-ed will be dedicated to discussing the impact of a policy issue on your community and the data supporting your position, it is critical that you conclude your article with a direct call to action. Depending on the policy issue, this request could include sponsoring or co-sponsoring a piece of legislation, voting for or against a bill, or supporting or opposing a regulatory action. If you are unsure of the best policy request to include, your state constituent organization, AAPA or PAEA, can offer guidance. Advocates can also schedule in-district visits with their representatives, which is a great alternative to traveling to DC if you're interested in meeting with your congressional members without leaving the state or district. To get started, make sure you first have a clear understanding of the meeting's purpose. Will you be discussing a bill that has already been introduced? Will you be asking your representative to sponsor new legislation? If the bill already exists, are you looking for your senators to co-sponsor the bill or vote to advance the bill from their committee of jurisdiction? Developing a specific ask is critical because it will inform offices of how to take action should they choose to support your position. With your ask established, you'll then need to check the House and Senate leadership calendars to look for the next state or district work period, so you can confirm when your senators or representatives will be in town, and visit the website of your congressional members for their state or district office contact information. Once you identify the best date when you know your member will be in town, call the state or district office you would like to visit and request your appointment. After you confirm your appointment with the office, it is time to prepare your approach. Practice how you will introduce yourself at the start of the meeting and be prepared to answer the following questions to inform the discussion. What is the issue? Who does the issue impact? Why is it important to you? How does the issue impact the state or district? Does the issue align with the member's legislative portfolio or priorities? If so, how? And how can the member help to resolve the issue? Also, consider creating a leave behind folder for your senators or representative. By using this information after the meeting, the office will be able to reference your contact information, a copy of the bill summary, letters of support, relevant articles, or a state or district fact sheet that supports your position. Now that your meeting is scheduled and your approach has been finalized, try to remember that the most effective meetings happen when you are punctual. So do not arrive to the meeting too early or late. The best meetings also happen when you're polite. So always make sure to thank the member or staffer for taking the time to meet with you. Make sure to be professional, which means that you should dress formally, refrain from discussing political campaigns and elections, and do not offer any gifts. Make sure to be personable, which can be accomplished by asking a member or staffer a question about their background, how they're doing, what they're working on, or if they're familiar with the issue. Always be honest. So instead of pretending to know the answer to a question if you're unsure, you choose to offer to follow up with more information after the meeting. And most importantly, make sure to be flexible, meaning that you're understanding that members of Congress have unpredictable schedules and that meetings can start late and early or be reassigned to a different staff member. And as we've mentioned before, always make sure to be specific and make sure to end your meeting with a precise request for action. Then, after the meeting, typically within 2 to 3 days, be sure to send a follow-up email to the congressional member or staff member that you met with to thank them again, outline the main ideas you discussed, and reiterate your request. You may include your response to any request for information in this follow-up email as well. If you do not hear back from the office over the following 2 weeks, continue to follow up via phone or email to inquire about the status of your ask. As is the case with all advocacy activities, persistence is key. And finally, although most of the advocacy activities covered focus on advocacy at the federal level, it is important that advocacy takes place at the state level as well. So if there's a state policy issue of particular interest to you, consider state level advocacy opportunities. Oftentimes, the most impactful state level advocacy opportunity is hosting your own state lobby day, which involves organizing a large group of stakeholders and bringing them to the State House on a day when the legislature is in session to conduct meetings and request key policy changes in the community. To host an effective lobby day, there are 8 important steps that every good advocate should follow. Step 1 is identifying the issue that you will be asking others to support. Is this issue being actively considered by state legislatures? If so, how will lobby day participants ask their representatives to respond, and how does it affect constituents in their district? Familiarizing yourself with these and other policy details will be crucial throughout each lobby day planning stage. Step 2 involves choosing the best date for your event. Generally, organizing a state lobby day requires planning to begin 4 months prior to the event date that you choose. If possible, the best time to schedule a state lobby day is during the first few weeks of your state legislative session, on a date just before a floor vote on the bill will take place, or in the final weeks of your state legislative session when bills tend to advance most rapidly. Also, some state legislatures have what is known as a crossover deadline, which is the date that a bill needs to reach the opposite chamber. In practice, bills that do not cross over before this deadline are far less likely to pass. For this reason, a date before your legislature's crossover deadline could also be the ideal time to schedule your lobby day. Step 3 is related to collaboration with state, local, and/or national stakeholders that share and support your vision, which is one of the best ways to share the responsibilities that come with organizing a state lobby day while maximizing overall participation. If you would like to find a partner to help plan your event, consider reaching out to your state chapter, PAEA, or AAPA. Other strategies for pursuing potential collaborators include speaking with your PA program director or faculty members about getting involved with your lobby day, contacting other PA students in your state, reaching out to coalition groups actively working on the legislation, and volunteering to assist with an existing lobby day advocating for the same issue. Once collaborators have been identified, determine your shared resources and refine your plan for executing the event. For step 4, advocates will want to finalize all details related to the 4 fundamental components of every successful lobby day: a training session, a morning briefing, participant meetings with legislatures, and a debriefing. Prior to advertising your event, have a specific plan in place to execute each component effectively. During the advocacy training session, which will take place on a day before the event or on the day of the event, your participants will learn about the central issue of the lobby day, how to effectively advocate on behalf of the issue, the particular requests they will be making to their elected officials, and best practices for conducting a meeting with legislators. For the morning briefing, participants will meet you at the start of your lobby day for an overview of the day, last-minute directives, and answers to their outstanding questions. Make sure to choose an obvious location in front of the State House for your morning briefing, or book a venue for your lobby day to operate from that is nearby and ideally within walking distance. In terms of participant meetings with legislators, they should be scheduled after the morning briefing and within a set time frame during regular 9 to 5 business hours. As you select your time frame for participant meetings, set aside an hour for lunch and factor in the time it will take attendees to conduct the meetings and travel from one meeting to the next. The debriefing, which is the last of the 4 components, is where you will meet with participants at the end of your lobby day to thank attendees and invite them to share stories and key takeaways from the event. Keep in mind that the best location for the debrief is the same location as the morning briefing because attendees are already familiar with the area. In step 5, the organizer is now ready to publicize the event, which happens about 3 months beforehand. Armed with the title of your event, a description of the event with a brief summary of the issue that will be discussed during your advocacy day, an outline of the lobby day agenda, and contact information for relevant event organizers, you will need to create an event page for your lobby day event through Facebook, Eventbrite, or another event hosting platform. In addition, be sure that your event page includes an option to register for the event within 1 month's time and messaging about when participants can expect to hear from lobby day organizers after the registration deadline. Setting this deadline is important because you will need to have a final list of participants 2 months before your event so you can initiate the process of scheduling lobby day meetings with legislators. You should also collect certain information from participants through the registration process that will make the meeting scheduling process easier, such as mailing addresses, occupations, PA program / employer names, etc. After your event is posted, work independently or with your collaborators to share the event information through newsletters, email lists, and social media. You may also ask your participants to share the event information with their social networks or draft an op-ed in a local newspaper on the issue that you will be discussing during lobby day. For step 6, once your state lobby day is 2 months away, you can now begin compiling your attendee information into a master spreadsheet. Using the mailing addresses that participants provide, you will need to match each participant to their state legislators. As you work your way through the attendee list, group participants together for meetings if they have the same legislators, and enter the contact information for each legislative office. You can reference this information later when it's time to request meetings. When you call or email a legislative office to schedule a meeting, communicate the reason for your meeting request, the proposed date and time for the meeting, the number of constituents that will be attending the meeting, and what they plan to discuss with their legislator. Upon receiving each meeting confirmation, enter all confirmed meeting dates and times into your master spreadsheet to help you keep track of your progress and customize participant meeting schedules. Alternatively, if you do not have the capacity to schedule all participant lobby day meetings on your own, you can provide your attendees with contact information for each of their legislative offices and ask them to schedule their own meetings. Although this will make organization of the event less centralized, it will save you time to focus on other event planning aspects that will make your lobby day successful. During step 7, organizers will order the materials needed to assemble your participant and leave behind folders once the event is 1 month away. Participant folders should be created for each attendee and may contain a general lobby day agenda with contact information for event organizers, a customized meeting schedule, social media guide, map of the State House, talking points for meetings, one-pagers on bills, legislator biographies, a state or district fact sheet displaying key data points, and meeting outcomes report forms, one for each meeting. Leave-behinds, which are folders left behind for each legislator after a meeting, should contain business cards, one-pagers on the bills participants discuss, and a state or district fact sheet. When participant folders are compiled, it is recommended that you send an electronic copy a week in advance of the lobby day for participants to review. And finally, step 8 is dedicated to what happens after the lobby day. Specifically, organizers will need to collect all participant meeting reports and remind participants to post about their experience on social media. The meeting reports will assist the organizer in following up with offices by identifying which legislators may need an extra nudge to get on board with your agenda, and social media posts by attendees will boost the visibility of your cause while serving as participant feedback that you can assess when determining whether to make your lobby day a reoccurring event in the future.
We hope this provided you with a good overview of PAEA, our policy agenda, and key opportunities for involvement as a grassroots advocate. Should you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us at tsmith@paeaonline.org or cmajeski@paeaonline.org. Thank you so much.